тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення Департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить Департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення Департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить Департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення Департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить Департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення Департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить Департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення Департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить Департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення Департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить Департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни від повітряної тривоги. Усі вернутись до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть у цьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від дій повітряної тривоги. Усім вернутись до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть у цьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від дій повітряної тривоги. Усім вернутись до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть у цьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте з захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте з захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте з захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте з захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте з захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте з захисної споруди або заховайтеся на місцевості. Дотримуйтесь спокою та порядку. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, повітряна тривога. Відключіть світло, газ, погасіть вогонь у печах. Візьміть засоби індивідуального захисту, документи, запас харчів та води. Попередьте сусідів та допоможіть хворим та людям похилого віку вийти на вулицю. Якнайшвидше дістаньте з індивідуального захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. противника, роботи або проживання, допомогу індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту цивільного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту цивільного захисту державної адміністрації. Громадяни, говорить департамент питань роботи або проживання. Допоможіть цьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника, роботи або проживання. Допоможіть індивідуального захисту людям похилого. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту цивільного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від повітряної тривоги. Всім вернутися до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть цьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від дій повітряної тривоги. Усім вернутися до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть усьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від дій повітряної тривоги. Усім вернутися до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть усьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від дій повітряної тривоги. Усім вернутися до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть усьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від дій повітряної тривоги. Усім вернутися до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть усьому хворим та людям похилого віку. Будьте готові до можливого повторного нападу противника. Завжди майте з собою засоби індивідуального захисту. Уважно слухайте повідомлення департаменту з питань цивільного захисту Львівської облдержадміністрації. Увага! Говорить департамент з питань цивільного захисту Львівської обласної державної адміністрації. Громадяни, від дій повітряної тривоги. Усім вернутися до місць роботи або проживання. Допоможіть усьому хворим
Вертолеты целые что-то есть, да? Надо КамАЗы забирать оттуда. Вот ВМ-ка наша стоит, если не ошибаюсь. Вот КамАЗ целый стоит. Вот этот КамАЗ эвакуирует. Дежурка? Да. Война, дежурка? Почему дежурный?
Бортовик.
Бортовик, да. Садись в бортовик, угоняй его туда. И потом, давай, я за тобой, короче, угоняю его. Ты автомат, оставь автомат. Бросай вниз, заберешь. Я за тобой еду. Давай, ты на КамАЗ эвакуируй, поезжай к терминалу, жду здесь.
We're talking about tanks, troops, and tires now, and what's wrong, perhaps, with Russian logistics. And we're really happy to have somebody who started this conversation going for thousands of people. Trent Telenko is a former staff specialist with the U.S. Defense Department and a former U.S. Army vehicle auditor, and he joins us now. Trent, it's great to have you because I, as I say, like tens of thousands of other people, saw a Twitter thread that you put up early in the first week or two of the war. You shared photos that you had found on Twitter about your experience working on Army vehicles, but more important, about those bogged down tanks, trucks. We're looking at some of them now. That may have been hit as well. But I'm just wondering about what have you seen?
All right, those two photos you saw were pictures of U.S. Army FMTV trucks that were sent back to Sealy, Texas after being hit by IEDs. It is because I was there when those trucks were coming in that I could recognize what was going on with the Russian vehicles in Ukraine. And when it came to tires, I spent 10 years auditing preventive maintenance on trucks that the Army had purchased from the contractor, hadn't been delivered yet. What that meant was that I could tell at a glance what was going on with the Russian tires. Most modern trucks have something called the central tire inflation system. It's basically a little electronic device that sends air out to the tires so you can go in mud and not get stuck. The problem with the system and with tires is it has to be exercised between once a week and once a month. And when we saw a $20 million Russian air defense vehicle stuck in the mud with its tire ripped apart, I understood immediately that if you're not maintaining a $20 million air defense vehicle, that, just driving it once a month, you're not going to be doing that with trucks. And what that means is when the Russians moved into Ukraine, vehicles that had not been moved in over a year, and they started using the central tire inflation system, well, the sides of the tires get very brittle by being out in the sun and not being moved. So when you air them down and crunch down the tires, suddenly all that brittle rubber cracks and the tires flatten. And in the case of the picture that I used to start that thread, you see the tire literally rip apart in the mud. The thing about corruption that they taught me as a government auditor is it cannot be centralized. If you've got someone at the top saying, well, I'm not going to buy the 100,000 mile tire, I'm going to buy the 40,000 mile tire and pocket the difference and put that on Russian trucks, that means everyone else in the chain of command is doing similar things to pocket a little bit of that money. So if you saw something so basic on so expensive a vehicle, it told everyone that knew anything about motor pools and preventive maintenance, the Russians weren't doing it. And you can talk with some, go ahead.
You sent us a bunch of images. Were those your images that we were airing just a minute ago? You could see them on the screen, right?
Those were,
all right, let's air those again. Let's air those again and explain what we're looking at, why you sent those to us, because you wanted to make a point about these specific images. So go ahead.
All right, that vehicle that you just saw was, and the ones that you're seeing are trucks that came back from Iraq in 2005 and 2006 to be rebuilt in Sealy, Texas. You're seeing the effect of blast of a mine, a big explosive planted on the side of the road, sending fragments through an unarmored vehicle. All right, right there, you're seeing a steel bed on a truck. Russian trucks don't use steel beds, they use wood. It's cheaper. We use it in commercial trucking all the time. The problem is, in a real war, when a blast goes off, that wood shatters and there's flying fragments that will eviscerate troops that are anywhere near it. This is the difference between an army that fights a lot of wars and an army that does internal security. They make those kind of make or buy decisions reflect the kind of missions that the army has. Right now,
Trent,
Russia's.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I thank you very much. You're describing for us exactly what I think so many people find so interesting about your contributions on this subject. That, you know, there's the old line, for the want of a nail, the horse was lost, right? And it goes all the way down to the want of the nail, the kingdom was lost.
Yes.
Right. And that's, they're not rotating their tires, they're not maintaining them. And you're also talking about corruption, people skimming some of the procurement budget and putting it in their own pockets. So is the Russian force outdated or corrupt or inexperienced? How do you read what we're seeing that is so surprising to the world that thought this was a mighty army?
And can they withstand Ukrainian assets?
Well, it has a huge army. It is an army that is much bigger than Ukraine's. And when it comes to logistics, they focus on railways, not trucks, because railways are cheaper. You can move more heavy equipment, longer distances. The Russians build their army around rails, and trucks move everything from the rails to wherever they want to go. NATO experts identified this weakness before the war. The Russians can move about 90 miles or 145 kilometers before they start reaching the end of their truck line of supply. They're trying to push to Kyiv, which is a little over 150 kilometers, and the Ukrainians flooded the areas around the roads. So they're stuck on the road, so Ukrainian drones can go out and whack trucks. In other places, the Ukrainians have been ambushing trucks, and the heat from the vehicles are destroying pieces of the road. So even though the road is the same distance, because you've got roads filled with trucks with exploded ammunition all over the road, it's much deadlier, and it takes much longer to go the same distance because you've got to very slowly go around those scenes of wrecked trucks that you see over and over again on social media.
And that has slowed them down. The old saying, what do they say? That amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. And Trent Talenko, I think that's one of the things you've really brought to the discussion. That's at Trent Talenko on Twitter. And we thank you very much for your insight and help.
We're going to keep following you, Trent.
All right, glad to help.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.
Members of U.S. citizens specifically for immigrant visas. Back to you.
Jesse Kirsch, important reporting. Thanks so much.
For more on the refugee situation, we want to go to NBC News senior national correspondent Jay Gray, who joins us now from a refugee center near the Polish border. Jay, good to have you with us again this morning. Tell us, what's the situation been like on the ground there over the weekend? How are the refugees and aid workers you've been speaking with holding up?
Yeah, they are holding up, but it's a grind, to be honest, Joe. We're going to walk you kind of down the walking path that these refugees take as they come across the border from Ukraine into Poland. And I can tell you, people are coming through in waves, and you can see it's crowded here, not only with those making the trip, but those offering help, volunteers, and of course, so much here for these families that are walking some 2 and 3 days to get here to take advantage of a hot meal, some fruit, clothes, blankets, medical attention if necessary as well. So while it is tough going into the 4th week of what's happening here, you continue to see just the gratitude on the faces of those families who are making this trip and making it to here, but realizing that their journey is still far from over, Joe.
So, Jay, we know several humanitarian corridors were established in Ukraine's hardest-hit cities yesterday. Have you seen any refugees coming in from these hard-hit areas like Mariupol? And are Polish officials preparing for the possibility that more will arrive from those areas now in the coming days?
Yeah, as you know, we had 4 humanitarian corridors that were open yesterday, and so we got out more than 7,000, according to Ukraine officials. That's a big number, especially when we've seen those corridors fall apart at times. And so as we continue down the path here, I can tell you that we have seen people from Mariupol here, not from the latest convoy, but we have, and the stories they tell are horrible, to be real frank, Joe. These are people, often a mom with young children, who have been through the horrors of war, that have dodged bullets and bombs literally to make it to this spot. They're so thankful to be here. The mom's thankful that they can keep their children safe. But then you've also got that nagging feeling for so many because they've left someone behind in all of that fighting. You've left someone that is a part of your family there to protect your homeland. And so we're hearing those stories more and more often at this point, and we'll continue to. As you guys have talked about, the UN says there are more than 7 million still in Ukraine, trapped there with no place to go. You've got to figure a lot of them are trying to get to border areas like this one, Joe.
We're just seeing the kindness on display as you walk along that path there, Jay. Very quickly, I want to ask you, President Biden is expected to travel to Poland at the end of the week as part of that big trip to Europe. What will that mean to some of the refugees there, if anything?
I think it'll mean a lot. I've asked a few about that, and they've talked about the involvement of the U.S. and how thankful they are, how proud they are that not only the U.S. but the world recognizes what is going on here. And him making this trip, I think, will be very important. In the big scheme of things, will it change things dramatically? No. But anything that can bring a smile or a sense of hope to these families that are making this trip is vitally important.
Jay Gray, as always, we appreciate your reporting from the border there. Thank you so much. Now, as we just said, President Biden will set out on his first foreign trip of 2022 this week. He's going to meet with leaders from NATO, G7, and the European Council countries to discuss the crisis in Ukraine.
That's right. And the head of NATO was on Meet the Press yesterday with a preview of the summit and the new reality facing NATO nations.
Regardless of how this conflict now ends, we are faced with a new reality, a new security reality, where Russia more openly contests core values for our security and are willing to use military force to achieve its objectives. And therefore, we need to reset our deterrence and defense. And one of the issues we'll start to discuss at the upcoming the summit of NATO leaders next week in Brussels.
Let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli with more on this. Mike, good morning to you. So let's talk about the Brussels summit. Who's attending and what are the main goals this week?
Well, Joe, this trip is an opportunity for President Biden, representing the United States, to meet with the heads of government of the other 29 NATO countries in a visible demonstration of the what the White House is calling ironclad commitment to the NATO alliance. They'll discuss the ongoing defense and deterrence efforts of Russia as this ongoing invasion continues. Now, we all know the sort of lines that the NATO alliance is being pressed to do more on air power, on a potential no-fly zone. But this is an opportunity for President Biden to lay out in person the ongoing reservations he has to moves that would be seen by Russia as escalatory and that might bring NATO into a more active conflict with Russia. At this point, the president has been clear that they will be continuing to supply defensive equipment to the Ukrainians, that individual NATO countries are welcome to and, in fact, encouraged to provide additional assistance on their own. We've already seen the U.S. working with countries like Slovakia, part of the NATO alliance, to do that, but that the U.S. continues to be concerned about provoking Russia further at this stage. Now, in addition to the NATO summit, the president will be attending a meeting of the G7 as well as the European Council. And in advance of that, today, the president will be holding a virtual call with the 4 other sort of core pillars of all 3 of those bodies, the leaders of the UK, France, Germany, and Italy.
And Mike, clearly President Biden has a full schedule, and we know that after the summit, he's also traveling to Poland for a bilateral meeting with President Duda. What do we know about the agenda there?
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, the president's trip to Brussels, we had been reporting on for most of last week. This stop in Poland was just added officially by the White House last night. Now, Poland is our most significant NATO ally that's really on Ukraine's doorstep, on Russia's doorstep, and so they have among the most significant concerns about this conflict should it escalate further. So that meeting with President Duda, another important opportunity following in the meeting with Vice President Harris just a few weeks ago to really reaffirm our commitment to Poland's security as well. And you just talked about this with Jesse and with Jay, the refugee crisis. Poland is really on the front lines of that as well. And the White House saying that President Biden will also be discussing ongoing efforts by the U.S., by the West, to support the humanitarian crisis that's now unfolding.
And Mike, Poland's prime minister says he plans to formally request a NATO peacekeeping mission into Ukraine at the next NATO summit. There are fears this could really potentially escalate the situation there in Ukraine. Quickly, are there any signs the U.S. would participate in this mission, or on the flip side, potentially block it?
Yeah, this has been one of those clear lines from President Biden. He said repeatedly that U.S. military presence will not be in Ukraine, whether that's a peacekeeping or an ongoing or active military operation. I think the onus is the same, that the president is unwilling to put U.S. soldiers on the ground in Ukraine for any purpose.
Mike Memoli, busy week ahead at the White House. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson will make history today as the first black woman to ever undergo a confirmation hearing to become a Supreme Court justice. President Biden praised the judge as one of the nation's brightest legal minds and cast her groundbreaking nomination this week as evidence of America's enduring democracy.
Here to help us break down the historic nomination is NBC News congressional reporter Julie Serkin and former special counsel to Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats on Supreme Court nominations, Michael Gerhardt. Good to have both of you with us. So, Julie, we're going to begin with you. Judge Jackson was nominated just last month. Remind our viewers who she is and what we can expect to see today on day one.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Well, in the words of the more than 40 Republican and Democratic senators who have met with Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson over the last month, she is, quote, extremely well qualified and impressive. But as you mentioned, she is also the first black woman to ever be nominated to sit on the Supreme Court. And today, that will kick off a grueling 4-day-long process. Think of it as the toughest job interview you've ever had, only for Jackson. This is, of course, for a lifetime appointment on the nation's highest court. So today, it'll start with opening statements. We expect Judge Jackson to be introduced by two people. One, her longtime friend and colleague in Harvard, and two, Judge Griffith, who was, of course, appointed by Bush, a sign that the White House wants this to be a bipartisan result in the end. And in the coming days, we will see hours, tomorrow 12 hours, Wednesday, possibly more, of questioning from members on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we expect Republicans to scrutinize her record, including her time as a public defender and a member of the Sentencing Commission. We know Josh Hawley, for example, will focus on her record on child sex offenders. He told me just last week that she sentenced them too low. Of course, the White House pushing back on that argument already, but we already know that Republicans are going to look at her and say what they say is, quote, soft on crime sentencing during her time there.
Thanks, Julie. And Michael, as we mentioned, Judge Jackson is the first black woman to be nominated as a Supreme Court justice and only the third African-American ever nominated. What is the historical significance of this moment?
It cannot be overstated. This is tremendous for the country, tremendous for the Supreme Court, and tremendous for American history. This is a big situation of glass ceiling being broken. Over 90% of the people who have sat on the Supreme Court up to now have been white men. And so this breaks that pattern in a fabulous way, because it really demonstrates the commitment to diversity on the Supreme Court, which is important in every area of life. Of course, this nominee has a really strong record, which just makes the nomination all the more historic.
Julie, you know, Judge Jackson could be confirmed simply by all 50 Democrats backing her, with VP Harris breaking the tie. But she was appointed to the D.C. Appellate Court last year with the approval of 3 Republicans, Senators Lindsey Graham, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. So after several knockdown, drag-out battles over recent nominees over the last few years, could this be a bipartisan approval, something that used to be kind of normal?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Senator Susan Collins, after she met with Judge Jackson, had glowing reviews. She said she was extremely well qualified, of course, not hinting at how she will vote in the end. But the White House, as I mentioned earlier, clearly wanting this to be a bipartisan confirmation, a return to normal, what they had in the past. There's almost no doubt that Judge Jackson will be confirmed in the end with just those 50 Democratic votes if she had to be. But this is really a historical moment for Republicans as well. I was talking to several Republican senators who do weigh the significance of this moment, a Black woman on the Supreme Court. They want to be a part of that. And one person that could potentially sort of break the dam here and lead Republicans along with him is Minority Leader McConnell. Let's take a listen to what he said yesterday when he was interviewed.
In the meantime, the committee will ask her all the tough questions. I haven't made a final decision as to how I'm going to vote.
And Minority Leader McConnell's vote, as I mentioned, could lead more Republicans along with him. So it's not a no. It's also not unusual for senators not to say ahead of time, ahead of the hearings, how they will vote on Judge Jackson. But of course, the White House, Senate Democrats, certainly Judiciary Committee Chairman Durbin, all hoping that this will produce some Republican votes so she can be confirmed on a bipartisan fashion, something we haven't seen in the last several nominees, including, of course, Amy Coney Barrett.
And Michael, we've seen SCOTUS confirmation hearings before. You are the former special counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Democrats on Supreme Court nominations. Tell us about the process. What do you think Republicans will try and focus on in their questioning of Judge Jackson, especially with the context that Julie just gave us?
A lot of this has already been scripted, and so we can expect certain kinds of questioning and certain kind of statements from Republican senators. We've already heard it today, and it has to do with the argument they're going to make that she's soft on crime. They'll also argue she's too liberal. And these are actually statements that are also code, because I think a lot of what's happening here is an effort by Republican senators simply to stop an African-American woman from making history. Every time there's been a groundbreaking nomination in the Supreme Court, there's been tremendous pushback, and the pushback always takes the form of saying the nominee is too liberal, too outside of the mainstream. I think that's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to argue here, because this nominee's been a judge for nearly 10 years. She's got a great record as a judge, and so I think that makes, they're going to try and paint her as, again, outside the mainstream, too liberal.
Julie Sirkin and Michael Gerhardt, thank you both for setting the table here on day one of hearings. We appreciate it. In other Supreme Court news this morning, Justice Clarence Thomas is hospitalized with flu-like symptoms. The statement from the court says the 73-year-old was admitted Friday night and has been receiving antibiotics to treat an infection. The court also said Justice Thomas's symptoms were improving and he could be released in the next few days. He'll participate in cases he might miss by using briefs, transcripts, and oral arguments that can be delivered virtually. Coming up, we're following breaking news this morning out of China, where a plane has crashed with more than 100 people on board. More on what we know so far.
Plus, a controversy in the classroom as parents go head-to-head over Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay bill. You're watching Morning News Now.
Let's go. This is a critical choke point for this fire. Military operation, witnessing the massive crowds. Nice to hear you both. Nice to really spend some time with you. Appreciate it. At any moment now. We'll meet Ukrainians who are defending their country one block at a time. When you were still in Kyiv, could you hear the bombing? My name is Lester. Who's this? What are you doing for teachers who feel that they're being stretched too thin? Did you understand how prevalent hunger was in your own community?
Hallie Jackson Now, weekdays at 5 on NBC News Now.
Can this still end diplomatically with Vladimir Putin in charge of Russia? There's a Supreme Court nominee. What would it take for you to vote to confirm her? So I guess the question is, can this end with sanctions alone? If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Now Tonight with Joshua Johnson, streaming weeknights at 8 on NBC News Now.
NBC News, streaming free now.
Welcome back. More of our coverage on the war in Ukraine coming up, including the plight of foreign nationals struggling to get out of the country and the shocking video appearing to show one official kicking black students. But first, here are some of the other stories making news this morning right now.
Breaking this morning, China's Civil Aviation Administration says a Boeing 737 plane carrying 132 people has crashed in the southern part of the country. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frere joins us now from Beijing for the latest. Janice?
Zinkley, we don't know a lot about what's going on right now. Rescue workers are beginning to reach the scene. There are some videos that have emerged, but still few details about why the plane went down.
This morning, a catastrophic plane crash in southern China, showing a forest in flames, debris on the ground, smoke rising from the area where the Boeing 737 apparently went down. Chinese state media sharing pictures of the aftermath. China Eastern Flight 5735 left Kunming Airport just after 1 p.m. here, heading over the mountains of Yunnan province toward Guangzhou, what was supposed to be less than a 2-hour trip. But the plane abruptly lost speed and altitude about 130 miles out, according to flight data. China's Civil Aviation Authority said radar contact was lost. Authorities confirm 123 passengers and 9 crew on board. Emergency crews now scrambling to reach them. China Eastern Airlines turned its website dark, with so little known about survivors. It's China's worst airline disaster in over a decade. The country has a good aviation safety record that officials have credited to newer planes and strict flying rules. The China Eastern plane was a Boeing 737-89P that was just over 6 years old. For now, there is no information on the cause. Boeing has faced issues in the past over different planes. Its 737 MAXs, which were temporarily grounded in 2019 and 2020 after crashes. China's President Xi Jinping has issued a statement saying he's shocked by the crash. He's ordered extra workers to the scene. They're expecting about 500 in those rescue crews to arrive by tonight. Boeing here in China says it's still waiting to get some information so they can piece together with the flight data to get a sense of what happened. China Eastern is saying that in the meantime, it's going to ground its entire fleet of 737-800 aircraft. But of course, the information that people are most waiting for is on survivors. And in that regard, people are preparing for the worst.
Yeah, Janice,
Joe Sinclair.
We'll definitely be keeping those passengers in our thoughts and prayers. Thank you so much.
We're keeping an eye on a developing story in Arkansas where one man was killed and 27 people were injured in a shootout at a car show Saturday night. Arkansas police said 2 people got into a gunfight at the show, injuring bystanders. 6 children were among those who were injured by the stray bullets. Police have not provided details about the reason the 2 suspects began shooting at each other. One person is in custody on unrelated charges at this time, and police say they are still searching for the suspects connected to the shooting.
Now to the spread of the Omicron subvariant BA2 in Hong Kong. After weeks of quarantine under China's zero COVID policy, the region is loosening its COVID restrictions as cases begin to drop. Travel bans in 9 different countries will be lifted on April 1st, and residents will only need to quarantine for 7 days instead of 14 when returning from overseas. But in other parts of China, the variant continues to disrupt the lives of millions. President Xi is now taking another look at China's COVID policy urging officials to find a way to reduce the impact of COVID on jobs. Meanwhile, the U.S. is seeing an increase in BA2 cases. The variant now accounts for 23% of cases in the country, a sharp increase from just last week. Officials say the variant could lead to an uptick in overall cases, but officials also add there's no need to panic over international surges. NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards joins us now for more on the latest COVID news. Erica, good morning. We've been following the rise of the BA2 variant overseas for some time now, but Dr. Fauci now says he doesn't expect to see that kind of surge here in the U.S. First, let's take a listen.
It does have an increased transmission capability. However, when you look at the cases, they do not appear to be any more severe, and they do not appear to evade immune responses either from vaccines or prior infection. Hopefully we won't see a surge. I don't think we will. The easiest way to prevent that is to continue to get people vaccinated.
So break that down for us. Why does he believe we won't see a surge?
Hey, Zikli, good morning. So, yes, this was an interview with ABC News. He did say that that BA2 variant is likely to become the dominant variant here in the country. We should know more tomorrow when the CDC releases new numbers there. And he did say that we should see an uptick, mainly because this new BA2 variant is so much more transmissible, about 20 to 30% more contagious than the first Omicron variant that we had. But because we had such a huge rise in Omicron earlier this year in January, it's possible that people have some immunity, either based on that prior infection or, of course, vaccination that might offer them some protection moving forward as BA2 becomes the more dominant strain. However, it's really unclear how long that protection lasts.
And it is important to note that nearly every state has loosened its COVID protocols as a result of COVID cases and hospitalization rates falling. And now several states are reducing their daily reporting of COVID cases also, including hospitalizations and deaths. Are health experts like yourself concerned that this move might be creating blind spots in our fight against COVID, or are there tools that can help fix those blind spots?
Sure. Well, there's about a dozen states who are no longer providing those daily COVID-19 case counts, dropping back to maybe once or twice a week. But, public health officials that I've spoken with say that, perhaps it might not be worth doing all of that work, mainly because the U.S. government has sent every American those rapid at-home tests, and any positive cases coming out of those would likely not be reported to their local health department. Officials are using other metrics like wastewater to try to track real-time COVID-19 spread across the country.
And finally and quickly, Erica, you covered a new potentially rare side effect of the COVID vaccine. What